So what if you could amplify an effect that could be caused on a man-made side here on the planet? Some technology we have would bend weather patterns or send storms, amplify them here on the planet, knowing where these sunspots were coming around, where the coronal holes would be generated, but then using the sun as an amplification device itself. If you know the cycles and you understand them, then cycles riding on top of cycles or embedded within or intertwined within. Okay, we see they want to go there, but then what? That's the whole thing. 100% compliance, Ransom. What can be harnessed besides the energies that are already harnessed at 100%?
I think we're well able to turn it around, and I think some events in the next year or two are going to wake people up to the point where they can no longer ignore reality.
Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast. It's about observing cycles, sharing insights, and solving problems together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was. This is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David Dubine.
In Poland, too, they were using the wood. People were even stealing park benches now. They would go into one of those little tiny mini chainsaws running off of electricity, even smaller than a regular one, like a mini one. They were just cutting park benches off to steal the wood. Like, how much is that costing? Well, how are they going back to wood in the EU when they're talking about all these windmills and green and this and that and the batteries and the solar panels? Yet now everybody's going to burn wood because they don't have enough electricity.
It's a chess game that you don't know you're playing with them. I mean, basically that's what they're doing. So we're gonna turn off the electricity, the gas, etc. We're gonna cause instability here, there, and everywhere. Well, what's gonna happen next? Well, obviously people are gonna want to start burning wood. So we'll outlaw that, but companies can do it in the name of greenery. So basically they could just steal land at the same time as they're telling the farmer, rancher, you can't do what you're doing because you're causing pollution. But meanwhile, they're doing stuff like this in the background. So this is a decision that comes as the U.S., Canada, Eastern Europe, Vietnam, and other forest nations continue gearing up to harvest their woodland to make massive amounts of wood pellets in order to supply biomass-fired power plants in the UK, EU, Japan, South Korea, and elsewhere. So in other words, these places that have taken up alleged green technologies, which is basically a planet-destroying terraforming program. When we're talking about deforestation, they always give you these images of the rainforest and, maybe our oxygen's going to get cut off. But really what they're doing is they're robbing the people of the world, the biodiversity that's in the plants and animals there. And we all kind of know that. But people need to eat. So they bee farm, and they've already found in places that we could have programs that are beneficial to the forest, beneficial to the farmer.
Have you started to notice an increase in the appearance of wrinkles, fine lines, bags under your eyes, or other unusual signs of aging? It may be more than just stress from the new year. Wrinkles and other marks of aging are one of the top signs that your collagen levels are low. It becomes more vital every year that you get older to supplement collagen into your diet for the sake of your skin's health. As you've gotten older, for example, you may have found that your skin isn't as strong. Whether you're in your 20s or 90s, you can experience the healthy aging effects of collagen that it has on your skin with the help of this multi-collagen powder. I add it to my morning coffee or tea. It tastes great while keeping me a little more full between meals. I want you to try it and experience some of the same effects it's had on me. Grab a bag. 51% off on your order, plus receive several bonuses before the New Year's sale ends by going to healthwithadapt2030.com. That's healthwithadapt2030.com and get ready to feel your best in the new year. Welcome 2023. And now on with the video.
But you're not allowed to do any of these other, programs because every single program is given to you to fail. It seems like that, in my opinion. So things that are meant to save the environment never save the environment. Instead, they cause problems. We'll worry about what carbon dioxide is going up in the atmosphere, which, we all know that plants breathe, and it's basically plant food. And without the plants sucking this up and giving us oxygen, we're done, right? If you starve all the plants of carbon dioxide, guess what? They put out less oxygen. Part of that's kind of a lie anyway, because the oxygen is not coming from the rainforest of the world. We do need it for a different purpose, but they won't tell you that that's actually the medicine box of the world. That's what, it was given to us on the planet so that everybody could be healthy. They could be massive industries could be made out of taking the compounds and giving it for the public to use and finding ways to do it at the same time as saving the species of plants. But we don't want to do that. We would rather, glyphosate the entire rainforest and at the same time claim we're trying to save it. So the oxygen is actually coming from the pine forest in the Siberia. Most people that are into that kind of realize that. They're not really chopping that down to the degree that, they're worried about. And plus, they're growing pine trees in its place. So what they're basically doing, when it boils down to it, what they're doing is they're making it illegal for human beings to survive wild temperatures and problems, because they're cutting off every avenue of where you would run to when you can't depend on the grid system that they have in place. So if you can't have gas and you can't have natural gas or electricity, and you start getting cold, obviously you're going to want to go and get some wood out of the forest. So what they're doing is naming all of the trees and pretending that they're trying to protect the earth and the trees and protect biodiversity is the way they put it. So you can't burn that wood because they're saying that it's not renewable, meaning that there's no way that you could just grow some more or be in harmony with your forest and only pull out the dead stuff and help the live stuff grow, which is how you occupy an area without destroying it, but still benefiting off of the resources. But if you really thought about it, where would Earth be right now if somewhere at some time in, I'm going to say at least thousands of years long empire on Earth as the modern man and civilization, at least, to the point of speaking and conveying ideas and having cities and towns, villages, etc. That basic of civilization, you would think that at some point, some civilization would have came along that its number one priority was we protected and saved all life forms on the earth at the same time as getting the benefit out of it, or went out of our way to make sure that each sentient being on the planet is having a good life. But that's never happened, and I don't think it ever will happen to, individuals to decide to be that way. But if a civilization had been there, what kind of technological state do you think we would be in? If you've got the smartest people that know about electricity and the electric universe, and you said, hey, all of you guys can just sit around and the people over here that like to cook are going to feed you food, and you make us have free energy. We can't have a civilization like that, but it seems like we could. But imagine if that civilization had taken hold, like, I don't know, in the Sumerian times. Imagine the technological advances we'd have if that was the type. But instead, we have the type to defeat, reset, and it seems to be that is the function of civilization at this point, is to bring it to a certain degree of population, a herd, if you will. They're putting it in our face right now because all of the programs are destined to fail. I mean, from Social Security to saving the planet, you pick a program that a government on this planet is in control of, and I could probably prove to you in a short amount of time that they are indeed doing the opposite of that.
Now take a look at those images that I sent you in the chat there. The coronal holes. 3 coronal holes sending electromagnetic effects our way with the sun sandwiched in the middle. So imagine a triangle, and on each end of the tip of the triangle, there's a coronal hole, and then put the Earth right in the center. And the arriving winds from our sun would be making electric storms on the freezing side come through. Now, this storm that you're seeing right now took some time to come into formation. It took, a good 6-7 days. That's how they knew on the GFS models where it was going to come. They're already following the winds, 500 millibar, whatever, 18,000 feet, as it moves around the top of our planet. And the polar vortex, too, the vortice up there in the column, where you can actually visualize where the column. So it wasn't just like it started today, but think about the amplification effects of the storm. Not starting it, amplifying it. So what if you could amplify an effect that could be caused on a man-made side here on the planet, some technology we have, would bend weather patterns or send storms, amplify them here on the planet, but then using the sun as an amplification device itself, knowing where these sunspots were coming around, where the coronal holes would be generated. Is that too far-fetched? Because, again, if you know the cycles and you understand them, then cycles riding on top of cycles or embedded within or intertwined within. See, then how deep does it go? How far? The technology is going to be limited. It's going to go one direction. But what about the cycles and the known cycle impact that can be used to amplify any event going on the planet on the terrestrial side of it, which could in then turn be amplified by technologies? And for one example here, I'll bring you back to even the 1940s, even further back, 1920s even, where they started using silver iodide in the clouds, causing floods. Who was in the 1940s? Forget the guy. Bernard, scientist, they were having a drought out in California, and the growing area out there was in a drought, and the whole ag industry was like, hey, we need to produce some rain. But he overproduced, and he flooded and it create these massive, massive floods, and then they sued him because he destroyed more crops by creating these massive floods than they would have continued just in the drought. Way back, cloud seeding in the 20s, and then these types of stories in the 40s. 1940s, literally 80 years ago. So with improved technologies like that, setting in motion and now ionospheric heaters, and who even knows what's up in space that's up there also. Because if you had an ionic heater in some way, if you were using a different type of power plant, like electrogravitics, instead of using solar panel harnessed and what they use for space stations, small nuclear power plants, whatever it is, you could also, from above, target that same area in the atmosphere. Now, I am sure since the 1960s, how many rocket launches have we have? And if you did total weight on the delivery of the cargo to these, quote unquote, space stations, I mean, how much of that could have been nuclear component parts, antigravitics technology? Well, you wouldn't need it. You could fly right up there yourself. But to install it in a space station to have continuous power, you could theoretically hit the top of that target area with what on the earthbound ionospheric heating, Aurora Research Project, you could connect those two in the middle and have double the effect. Okay, well, there's so much well-known science about that I am just regurgitating, but in a bad way, because the real science can be explained so much more succinctly to let you understand how developed that truly is. Like where they can target and how much they can heat the atmosphere to bend a cloud system around it, to bend a jet stream down to then collide with another cell and create more rainfall. Like that's old established science. Now, do you have the cycles to start matching it up with something that's coming from the sun to amplify that? That's the question. So the storm system comes around. They saw it would be small perturbation. Maybe it'd be a little bit further south on the polar vortex. One of those pressure areas, the low pressure would have spun further south and not been locked in the cone at the very top of 80 degrees north or 75 degrees north up to the North Pole at 90 north. If there was a little bit of that lower pressure, could that be amplified using the existing technologies on the planet, halfway around the planet? No, it would take 2 weeks to come. But at the same time, with the solar forecasting, being able to go out and look at the backside of the sun, stereo A, be able to see what's on the backside of the sun and inbound to that exact same center position that I'm looking at a triangle of solar winds coming in directly over the Earth. It's interesting. It's almost like the bullseye of a target surrounded by solar wind coronal hole streams. Now, let's say you knew that was inbound 15 days later, but at the same time you knew it would take approximately 15 days to amplify that low pressure system from the other side of the planet over Asia and get it to come swinging around so it goes over North America at the same time, in conjunction with this coronal hole stream on a triple, to amplify the effect. Two of these sciences are at that apex and at that levels right now where this could be done. And all you're doing is overlaying data sets. That's simply it. Once you got one in motion, now is it chicken or egg on that? Did they know the coronal hole stream was coming around and like, all right, this will be the effect. It's going to amplify the low pressure system, which is going to create a swirling sort of scorpion tail. Every time we get the solar wind, there's a scorpion tail type of storm. And then they try to generate it on the other side of the planet, knowing that it could be with the ultimate of the technologies, it could be amplified all the way as it spins around, and then on top, bam. So is that too far-fetched? What they can do with solar casting, especially with SDO and stereo ahead, behind?
I mean, they've shown that they can do that, but what's even weirder than that is they're better at analyzing the outcome of when this happens. What I mean is they study the cycle so much that it's like derivatives and the other stuff, like gold and oil and water. They know that weather's coming, and they're sophisticated enough to just use what's happening and turn off things and create situations out of incoming events that they get the firsthand knowledge of. Because think about all these systems. If they really didn't want to share satellites with the public, like if there was something really that people could start adding up easily without a giant quantum computer doing the algorithm for them, a lot of people are good at this information and predicting stuff, but I don't think they can to the degree of some of their learning machines and artificial intelligence. I don't think that they can compete with that. If they have the info, which they do, we know that they do, and anything was simple enough for the layman, so to speak, even with degrees, to figure out that, hey, look, they're doing this because of that, they're causing these events to happen, they would just turn off these satellites, like, oh, well, it needs maintenance. These three need maintenance. So you wouldn't see something easy coming at the Earth. So they don't really hide what the sun's doing so much. But I do think that they know that whenever the cycle comes and it affects the Earth's weather right afterwards, I think they have models that they know exactly how much cosmic rays and sun materials coming in and what that's going to do for cloud nucleation and all of that other stuff. I'm sure they have theories and models in the computers that do that. We've seen some of the ones they share with the Weather Channel that they're only about 50% right, but one or two of them is usually right on the money. So that means that one of their models that they use can do it good. I think they forecast this stuff, and that's why you get power grids going down, backdoor deals where people make millions. So they just keep inching their agendas along with each little emergency that happens instead of, like I was saying before, they don't prepare for these. They prepare for the damage. Katrina is a good example. They knew the exact scenario that Katrina was going to do. They had modeled it, and then you go on the engineering side of things, and the Army Corps of Engineers even told the people, the city of New Orleans, that they needed to fix certain areas of their reservoir and their water walls and all of that, and if they didn't, it was going to dump into downtown New Orleans and flood most of the wards. So they just ignored it. They knew it was going to happen. So they waited for that model to happen, and it came rolling up in there. And you know that certain people got billions and billions of dollars disappeared into the money just for that event alone. And then you start adding up all of the other events that they seemingly enact instead of act. Usually when there's most of these rescue things, like take Harvey, for example, the populace, what were they calling the Cajun army or whatever, they rolled in, they were helping people out with their boats and their jet skis and all of that stuff. But where was the government? They were hiding. They let it flood. They knew that destruction was going to happen, but they know that they get more money from rebuilding and taking tax money or closing down things or changing, properties. All of that's in their power, and they know that they could manipulate each and every one of these disasters to their benefit. And I think from top down, it's kind of very nefarious that their predictive models, they're using all of this to know when to start wars, when to start the supply chain distribution problem. I think it's almost like they have a better set of astrology down to the sun of ours. In astrology, it kind of predicts events, so to speak. This is like the real deal astrology. They literally have satellites up paying attention to everything. They have foreknowledge of it because they've been watching the same cycles that we have been. So they know there's no global warming. They know that's just a campaign to make you feel bad so that they can manipulate the events of nature to their benefit.
Look in the center of that coronal hole stream image from SDO that I sent you. It looks like a dragon right in the front with the head, almost like a sea serpent as you see it bend down and then Z across the screen again. Follow the train of thought out after that. So you have this coronal hole stream amplifying this once in a generation or once in a 50-year cold event that would come out and destroy the crops. And you would know because of this single event and where we sit in the year, because in This part of December, not all the winter wheat has gone to dormancy. So there would be a vast wipe out of that and the home gardener and the greenhouses and many other things, which in turn would what happen? It would amplify the food shortages. It would amplify the supply chain breakdowns. It would amplify inflation because there's an excuse because people are buying more, so there's not as much in the supply chain, so they had to raise higher prices, the delivery costs, da-da-da-da. So if you're trying to move the planet closer and closer to digital rationing cards and central bank digital currencies to create an economic event, let's say, or condition of life event, it gets nasty enough that people will want to jump to a digital rationing card, but at the same time, they'll accept the banking system that goes with it. So they're not going to try to force you onto the economics first. They're going to starve you and force you to beg for the digital rationing card, and then you also get that mechanism to use it with the programmable money with the CBDCs. Like if you're going to try to sell me just an economic thing to change over, it just doesn't work. But if you're going to sell me my kids and my family's starving, and I need this new QR code. By the way, it's on the blockchain. It's immutable. You can't change it. It's registered for you only, and we'll know what you spend. You get 1 pound of butter and 1 gallon of milk and, whatever for a week. Maybe it includes a per diem one. This will pay for your place to stay, too. If you're going to go to this rental place in the city, we got some rooms there. Like that is the ultimate control. But to put it in motion, you're going to need to scalp everybody and raise the food prices yet again, and not really raise it as, and I need to pay more money, but create a true shortage so prices will rise outside the traditional markets. Here's another thing about weather, at least in this season. If you could engineer weather again, like we talked about in the beginning, combining the two sciences, the sun and also 15 days out, pushing those low systems. If you could engineer a massive drought across the West and put a blocking pattern in to send continuous drought to the grain-growing regions of the U.S., central, which are now getting frozen in this same storm. They've been under a drought forever, and that's the most dangerous thing. If the soils aren't really that wet, that cold will just get down in there and get those roots. Snow cover is the best thing. If your crops are covered in snow, they're totally insulated. You wouldn't even think about this. It would be a non-story if it had snowed a ton out over our crops already, but it hasn't, and it's been really dry. And that's the most dangerous, is the dry and the cold, because, that water will freeze in the soil and create a layer, and the bottom part of the roots will still be safe. But if there's no water in there for anything to freeze, there's going to be no temperature layering in there. It's going to go as cold as it can get, as deep as it can get. Now, if you had the ability to fire up an ionic heater and just leave it in place and create this massive high-pressure blocking dome over the Midwestern and Western grain-growing states and put it into a drought for like 6 months to a year, even longer, 2 years, you would also dry out the Mississippi River eventually. It wouldn't be instantaneous by any means, way, shape, or form. But all that runoff that was coming in from west of the Mississippi slowly dried into nothing. So all that inflow from the western part of the United States into the Mississippi dried out at the same time all the grain zones dried out. Hence creating, not to zero, but incredible reduction in yields because of the drought. And he would cut off the transport corridor where those grain shuttles would get stuck because the water's too low. If you wanted to do the same thing, not being able to get fertilizers in, it's the same corridor. So if you make it low, then you block off the fertilizers and farm implements inbound, herbicides, pesticides, repair parts for the tractors and machinery and processing and belts and, whatever. There's a huge amount of things. And also the outbound cargo. So what would happen then? Well, you would see the same thing. All the grain storage facilities filled up completely. To the point we can't even put one more kernel of corn in there. It's going to, like the wafer thin, boom. Monty Python fans. So now they unloaded all the grain all over the banks of the Mississippi River. They put up these instant tarps, and we got millions and millions and millions of tons of grain from this harvest this year that can't get down the river. And they're going to have to wait until April until it starts to move itself about again. And see, I talked about these same things after I came back from that dairy conference. But then if you were able to engineer weather you would cause that same area to flood and then wash all those grains downstream on record floods through the Mississippi coming into springtime. When that happens, there is truly a grain shortage on the planet. If we would have lost our winter wheat due to this freeze event, and suddenly there's massive floods that wipe down and actually take out millions and millions of tons of stored grain that's just under tarps on the banks of the Mississippi. I mean, all this went on and hardly anybody knows about it. Unless you're in that industry, you would never even know this occurred. So now you got all these plays together here. Black Sea corridor is completely cut off for grains. Suggested planting for Ukraine this year, this is last week or 2 weeks, roundup for the year numbers. They expect Ukraine to be able to plant 30% maximum of its arable land coming into this next planting season. That was pre how many double strikes have they had on their electrical infrastructure since the last 2 weeks. Forget the exports. They just won't have any more. They won't even be able to grow it to export. And that'd take about 30 million tons out of the global. Because if Ukraine needs to start importing instead of exporting, and they're barely growing enough just for their own people, then that leaves, 20 million tons the world needs to find from somewhere else. And it ain't coming from Brazil or Argentina. So then you really can put the whole world into a complete, I wouldn't say at the border of a famine yet, but I would say very deep food shortages to the point that it would affect everybody that eats on the planet, literally everybody. And because it got to that level, the amount of money going into food is going to take away and crumble the rest of the economy. But then your energy prices would be going up at the same time. Okay, we see they want to go there, but then what? That's the whole thing. 100% compliance, Ransom. What can be harnessed besides the energies that are already harnessed at 100%?
The central banks is who we're talking about, not the government that you think you elect, but the central bankers and the central banking cartels in every single country in the world are going to be okay with this digital currency as long as it's there. Kind of like the banks have their FDIC, federally, protected money in the bank as long as you keep it in there. Well, don't worry. They'll have a similar agency that takes care of your cryptocurrency for you and make sure that it's all above board. You paid your taxes. And which case, once they have it that way, now they have the ability to control your opinions, where you go, where you buy your food, whether or not you have a car, whether or not you have a driver's license, all of these things that are going to be tied into it because they already are tied into it. I put to you, as the most valuable and important piece of property that we have is our body. So whenever you have these programs that are talking about they're going to save the environment, you know what? You might as well go get in one of these little space pods they're offering in Switzerland now and let them put you to sleep, because that's where we're going. I don't want to be in that world, so I don't take part in any of these programs. The truth is that we need to start harvesting the earth, and not only that, but we need to be, repairing it. And each house or each individual with a piece of property needs to find some way to balance themselves with their property, meaning that they should be growing food, helping someone else grow food, or doing something that totally cuts the government's programs out of your life, the ones that are named the opposite of what they do.
Is everything the opposite of what it is or what it appears? Because it seems the reality we are looking at is an inversion. Something's going to try to correct itself. I think we are at that point now. I think it's more the social contract has been broken, and everybody agreed with the falseness or the inversion of it because it was comfortable. Now the comfort's gone, the ways and means are gone, the money's gone, whatever is gone is gone. I think it's more just the thought in life of being able to jump to the next level or follow that dream. That's gone at this juncture. So that social contract's been broken where leave me alone and I'm going to follow the dream. I don't care what it is. At least that option was open in our mind. That has closed. So the social contract, just based on that alone, is broken. And I think a lot of people are feeling it, seeing it, being affected by it. So how many people does it take to truly wake up before things just start to switch back because they have to? Society only moves in one certain direction or another because enough people believe in that idea, and then it moves that direction. And then he started to get into this philosophy of does thought create reality? Because generally when it does get to a certain percentage of the population, it just moves. Sometimes by force, but many times, again, by that belief in the future of something better. Well, now governments can't provide that. And as looking out into 2023, tremendous opportunities if you're positioned in the right ways to help people transition through these times, get more food on people's plates, make sure their lives are more comfortable. And in that, weaving through this chaos, if you're able to help people live better lives, that is the greatest opportunity in human history, because we're in the biggest change in human history. So are we at the bend point, Ransom, to sign us off tonight? Do you think we're at that bending point where humanity's woken up enough, or we're going to have to go down the road a bit more in 2023 before most people understand it and somehow the ether bends it back the other direction?
I think we're well able to turn it around, and I think some events in the next year or two are going to wake people up to the point where they can no longer ignore reality, and they'll just have to deal with it. I think that's a beneficial future for us as the cold realities of future, so to speak.